Perry Mason takes on a case that is 25 years old, Chapter 4. The sad endings of Ralph's life had affected so many people and had taken a back burner now. It had now been over 20 years, and Sherry gone on, and her daughter had gone on and married, and Joe was thinking about retiring. Joe walked into the evidence room where he had gone so many times before and once more took out one of the boxes that held some of the evidence on the case that had rocked his career and changed his life. Ralph's items had been sitting there for all this time, and before he retired, Joe wanted to take a last stab at finding out what had happened on that horrific day. There were so many pieces, small little pieces, some receipts from the day. There were no timestamps on most of them. However, there was a timestamp that was still visible on a few. Those timestamps let Joe know, and others know where Ralph or Sherry had been the day before. There should be only so many fingerprints on this timestamp. However, the water had destroyed those so many years ago. Tom now had a friend and partner who was also interested in what actually happened to the young man who had been found in the canal. Marcus had now been a police officer himself for over 10 years, and there had always been thoughts and ideas on what could have happened on that fateful day and the days prior to the landing of the murder. Once again, Joe and Marcus went through the items and sent a few back to the lab in the hopes that somehow some DNA could be discovered. There had been amazing discoveries over the years, and it was one of those few hopes that the murder could be solved. It was exactly 20 years to the day that had changed so many lives. The day that he had found Ralph's body, Joe got a phone call that would finally put a piece of evidence to the long overdue solving of the case. Joe and Marcus were both at the office when they received an intriguing phone call. The caller's name was Jane Field. She had lived with the knowledge of what had happened the night before Ralph was killed for all these years. Her husband, Fred, had been quiet about everything, and she had always wondered what had happened that night. That evening, he and Ralph and some of the co-workers had gone out together drinking. The company was in the process of being sold, and there had been some discord about the sale. The worry was that if the company was sold, they were afraid that they could lose their jobs. Many of the guys were upset, but Fred had said that Ralph had been more upset. He was sure as the youngest worker he would be the first to go. Jane had been at the doctor's office the day before. She had not been feeling well and had a terrible stomach ache that just wouldn't go away. The doctor had some bad news. She had cancer and the diagnosis wasn't good. If things didn't work out, such as sweet chemotherapy, she had less than 6 months to live. She had to get this off her back. This is going to be bad. Bad for her, bad for her husband, but she needed to let the police know what she knew. It was time for the truth to come out. The two police officers headed right over to the Field home. It was a neat home with nice shrubs and a large yard. They were met by Jane at the front door. She appeared a little nervous, but welcomed them in and offered them a cup of coffee. With the taking of a deep breath, Jane began to tell the two men who she had known all her life the truth of what happened the evening before Ralph had disappeared. I was much younger then, and my boys were still in grade school. Fred was the manager at the store, and he had been busy negotiating the sale of the company. It had not been known to many at the time. However, Fred was going to get a huge bonus if he could finish the sale by the end of the month. Fred had gone to a lot of trouble to make sure that the deal that he made with the buyer would remain secret. He had been in the office in the evening talking with the buyer when Ralph had walked in. Ralph had heard the conversation and was now aware that the deal had been made with Fred. There had been an argument and the fight had actually gotten physical. Fred had hit Ralph that evening. Joe and Marcus listened to the words that James was saying. She would be dealt with later, but now they needed to go talk to Fred. The business had been bought, and now Fred was the manager of a large business that employed over 200, not the 20 that it once employed 20 years before. Fred now owned a Tesla, a home in the mountains of New Hampshire, and the nice house in the small town. This could be the smoking gun that they had been looking for. Could it have been Fred at the time? He had been a suspect, but they had never been able to prove anything. Well, the two officers headed to the factory where Fred worked. It was a clean building with modern windows, as they had hoped Fred's car would be parked there. And yes, it was. It was right in his parking spot. Fred was in his office, remembering what had happened on this very day 20 years ago. He had always worried that and felt sick whenever the day came. He had to live with the fact that he and Ralph had had a physical confrontation on the evening before he had disappeared. They had shaken hands and gone home and out to drink that very evening. But he had always worried that Ralph might have bumped his head during the fight. He had never been able to definitely answer the question in his own mind. Now his wife of over 25 years had cancer, and he was contemplating talking to the police. As he looked up, the police were there. They wanted to talk to him. End of chapter.